Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about Dane Cook and how he became one of the most popular comedians in the world at one point, and then where things started to go wrong in his career, and why you barely even hear from him anymore. And then I'm also going to be talking about why he got so much hate, and if that hate was just people being jealous of him getting really successful and famous, or did people actually have some valid reasons to dislike him. So Dane Cook's career really started taking off in the early 2000s, and then around 2005, he really exploded because of MySpace, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons why people disliked him at the time, and why more traditional comedians disliked him, because he was one of the first comedians to really get something going on the internet and figure out how to use that to promote themselves and gain a massive audience. And back then, I'm sure a lot of comedians thought that there was something wrong with promoting yourself on the internet, and they probably thought that the only right way to promote yourself is by going on radio shows or doing TV shows or late night shows. And at the time, Dane was even trying to explain to other comics that this is going to be the new thing and they should probably get on there, but they just did not understand it, and they felt like there's something wrong with it.
I would love to help you, man. And we talked a couple times, and I tried to kind of set him in motion, but he was still of the belief, like, why should I let the fans like reach out to, I go, it's like a fan mail. It's like email,
yeah,
but electric. You know, I'm trying to explain it like, you know, to Richard Jenny, one of the best comedy writers, you know, of generations before. And yet there was a resentment to like, oh, but I don't want to necessarily talk to the fans, because I think people thought at that time, I'm giving them access to my integrity. They're going to try to change me.
Yeah.
They're going to try to tell me I didn't like that joke, and we don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's the world. People are going to like it or not. So,
and even Bert at the time didn't realize how important the internet was.
We're turning around and chatting on your computer,
yeah,
and you introduced me to MySpace. You said, this will change your career.
Right. I remember we talked about that, and I was like trying to tell you, like, this is how your top 8.
And I was like, good luck, Dane. And then like a week later, I'm in Venice, and these dudes are doing Coke programming MySpace, and they're like, hey, do you know Dane Cook? And I said, I do.
That's right, you told me that.
Yeah, and I was like, and they were like, you should try getting on MySpace. And I was like, guys, I'm a real guy. I don't talk on the internet. I talk to you like this. I'm a fucking idiot I am.
It was me and Tila Tequila at the end of the pack.
What happened to Tila Tequila?
If you're wondering what happened to her, there's a video about it. She completely lost her mind. It's kind of sad. But Bert, it's crazy he didn't even realize the value in this. Like, his whole career is just on the internet now. Every comedian's career is on the internet. Like, if you're a comedian that's going to start nowadays and you don't want to use the internet to promote yourself, you're going nowhere. Like, you have no chance. So at this time, one of the comedians that actually did see value in this and jumped right on it once he heard about Dane's following was Joe Rogan.
But you're the best guy at connecting with the internet. You were the very reason why I started a MySpace page. I read an article about you in People magazine, and it said you had 300,000 MySpace fans. And I was like, you fucking imagine. I go, 300,000 people, you could just send out an email to 300,000 people. I'm like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fucking brilliant. So I started a MySpace page that day, and I hired my friend Duncan to take care of it.
Yeah.
And my friend Duncan got a job, and my friend Duncan's job was just add friends to the MySpace page, and I'd send him blogs, and he put up my blogs.
And Joe was never even really a big fan of Dane's. He actually had a problem with him for a while, which we'll get to later on. But even with that, Joe admits that Dane changed the game in terms of comedians promoting themselves.
But you did it all on your own. Like, everything was done through your own, you figuring out how to self-promote. And you changed everybody's attitude about it. No comics are good promoters except, I mean, there's a few. It's very rare. But until you came along, no comics were really good at self-promotion. Totally changed my attitude towards it.
So that's from a really early episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, episode number 33, which was 2010. But more recently, Dane's actually talked about how back in the day, Joe was motivating him a lot in terms of the internet.
But my relationship with Joe was interesting, and I only realized this as I got a little older. Like, we only had a competitive relationship.
Yeah.
It really wasn't, we never said, you want to get lunch? Ever. It was either we're competing on a video game or something in a club where he didn't like my fans or I didn't like.
Oh.
And it always seemed like, in oddly enough, and I wish I haven't talked to him in years, but I would say, I think you brought a lot of good out of me, because whether it was the website, he had a cool website. He had like the alien with the horns.
Yeah.
And I had a cool website. And I kind of always thought, like, maybe we're both looking at each other, like, you know, in our fast cars going, who's gonna who's going to get there?
So I'm sure one of the reasons why people hated Dane at the time is because he promoted himself so much and it was working. So I'm sure a lot of other comedians kind of got jealous of that, and they probably think that he just got lucky and he doesn't really deserve the success that he's having. And then I'm sure their fans are thinking the same kind of thing, like, hey, my favorite comedian is a lot funnier than this guy, but I guess he just didn't stumble upon MySpace at the right time. That's why he's not as successful. And also, if you're going to be the first comedian to gain a massive following on the internet, you're definitely going to be the first comedian to get a lot of hate from the internet, especially if your name is Dane and you look like this and you're on MySpace. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. And then because he's so popular, you can't even ignore him either. And if you hear everyone always talking about how he's the funniest person alive and people keep telling you got to go see him, and then you listen to his comedy and you don't find it that funny, of course you're going to start to get annoyed by it. And then you'll probably start to look for reasons to dislike him even more. And that's the big question. Are those reasons actually there? And is Dane Cook actually a douchebag?
I find that when I talk to people that the reason, like, the attitude is against you is people think you're an asshole.
I don't see how that.
You don't act like an asshole sometimes. You're not dismissive or self-centered, or you may go too far on stage and hurt someone's feelings.
Listen, what I do on stage and how that affects people's feelings towards me. If you're offended by a persona and a performance, I mean, again, it's me, but the light switches on, the enhanced entertainment version. I don't know what to do with that. If you have a problem with me personally because of something that's happened off stage, we can talk about that.
Right.
But man, if I spoke to every person that had an issue with me because of comedy. Well, who the knows where we'd be?
What do you find what do you find that the criticism really is? Because I can't quite figure it out. I mean, I know there's been plenty of people that don't have punchlines.
I don't feel like the criticism exists as much as it was at the height of the white hot spotlight of whatever was Time Magazine and all that a few years ago. I don't get it as much today.
I just never understood how you were the Antichrist of comedy. I didn't understand that. And then
I don't think I was even ever that.
No, but I mean, you were represented something. I mean, I just don't. I never quite understood it. I was not on that bandwagon. And then, like, the tides got worse when you got called out for the stealing of Louis C.K.
Right.
And what happened with that? Did you credit him as a writer on the first CD?
No.
Oh
no.
Okay.
I didn't credit Louis C.K. because I never stole anything from Louis C.K.
So that was from Mark Maron's podcast, which we'll get into more later on. But first I want to talk about the joke theft accusations, because Dane said that this was one of the hardest things to deal with in his career.
What has been one thing that hurt you the most?
What is the one thing that hurt me the most?
The one thing that, like, I can tell you, like,
plagiarism allegations.
Seriously?
Yeah, man. It was like it was an impossible mountain in front of me to understand how I could. It was unbelievable, man.
So there were a lot of comedians that were accusing Dane of stealing jokes, but the main two were Joe Rogan and Louis C.K. And Joe said that he noticed this early on, before Dane's career really blew up, and he said he even confronted him about it. But after that, he still couldn't trust him at all, so he stopped performing at the Laugh Factory. But it sounds like since Dane wasn't really a big comedian at the time, this wasn't a big story at all, and no one really talked about it that much. Joe called him out. He couldn't trust him anymore. He just moved on. And Joe just didn't think that Dane would make it as a comedian, so there's no reason for him to turn it into some giant thing. And this was also going on with Louis C.K. as well, except Louis was even less confrontational.
At one time on the set, and he's like, nah, man, I don't want to get into it and talk about it publicly, just because then it seems like you're bashing the guy who's getting famous. So Louis actually tried to be very low-key about that whole thing.
He tried to be big about it. I had a conversation with him about it, and I said, dude, you're not going to come off bitter if you're just honest about it. You don't have to, you don't have to let a guy get away with something like that. You can talk about it and not come off bitter. It is possible.
So I think for a while, these were just rumors, and a lot of it was going on behind the scenes. The public wasn't too aware of what was really going on here, because like they're saying, Louis didn't want to come off as bitter, and he didn't want people thinking that he's just attacking Dane because he's the guy on top. But then in 2008, I believe there were 3 YouTube videos that were uploaded comparing Dane's jokes to Louis's jokes and insinuating that Dane was stealing Louis's. And now, unfortunately, all those videos were copyright claimed and taken down, so you can't watch them anymore. But I think those videos are what really got the conversation going about Dane stealing jokes, because soon after this, when Joe was on Opie and Anthony, they also had on the owner of the Laugh Factory, Jamie Masada, and Joe's really going in on him about how he's letting a joke thief perform at his club, and Jamie's trying to do whatever he can to defend him because Dane would perform there a lot and he was a big draw for the Laugh Factory. This was at the peak of his success. He was starting to do big time movies, so him performing there obviously will help Jamie a lot. It'll help bring people in and sell tickets.
And I work on this shit over and over and over again for months, and then some fucking douchebag goes up, he sees me kill with some bit, and then he reworks it, and then he goes on stage. And you know what? Club owners don't do shit about it, and then they get on here on a radio show, and they say, no one steals, he doesn't steal, he doesn't steal.
But
and it's not true.
No.
You haven't looked into it at all, and you're defending someone who is widely known throughout the country as being a thief through the comedy community. You talk to club owners, you talk to people in HBO, you talk to people everywhere that I talk to people, they know he steals.
Okay, let me explain something. You thought of a material. Doesn't mean somebody else. If you thought of building a helicopter, and doesn't mean another person, another place does not be able
There is
to
a thing
see.
called parallel thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's, and then
I've
you
had that happen to me.
Yeah, but you
Sure,
cannot.
I've had that happen too. Definitely
Thank
crabs
you.
in a bucket.
Thank
However,
you.
with the Dane Cook thing, they were calling him a thief. They were calling him a thief for years. Years ago, they were calling him a thief. I had a problem with him way back when he was doing one of my bits on Premium Blend. He did my bit about tigers fucking on the Discovery Channel. He changed it to rhinos. I called him up. He told me his own fucking agent told him to stop doing the bit, and he was going to stop doing it. Then I came to the Laugh Factory, and he's doing one of my other bits on stage. I confronted him, and that was the last time I worked at the Laugh Factory. I don't work there anymore because I didn't want to go up in front of him and see him doing my shit and have him go up and do it. But I never thought Dane was going to make it. I, like a lot of people, thought that Dane was like a mediocre comic. I mean, he's a fantastic self-salesman, a great marketer, a genius strategist as far as like marketing himself and promoting himself. I mean, you got to give the guy massive amounts of credit for that tireless worker in that regard. But I never thought he was very funny, so I didn't worry about the repercussions of him stealing material. I heard it from everybody. Every comic that I know says Dane Cook steals.
No, Dane Cook. I have not seen
Buddy,
something.
just because he's your number one guy, buddy, does not mean he does not steal.
Joe,
Buddy, tell the truth.
Joe, that is
Don't
one
speak
thing.
with fucking tongue.
No, I tell you something. Dane Cook, he's a most hardworking guy.
Yes, very hardworking, very ambitious.
Everybody, and let me tell you, everybody jealous of him. They trying to undercut
very
him.
true.
Oh, he's this, he's this.
Very
okay,
true.
what else you can come in? Because he have number one record, he have number one everything.
But
what?
They've always said he was a
jealous.
thief way before that.
No, they
yes,
did not.
they did.
As soon as
Yes, they did, bro.
As
They
soon
did.
as he made it, everybody jealous.
No.
Come on,
Way before. That's not true.
I never heard of it. No, as soon as
Jim?
he made it.
Have you ever heard this?
I have heard it. Well, the problem was when the clip showed up online, it got to be ugly because between Louis and Dane, the clips were there, and it was like, oof.
It's obvious.
Yeah, but now with the internet.
But it's not just him. It's Jim Brewer. He's stolen from me. He's stolen from a million different comics in LA.
So I actually found this video on YouTube that somebody made about it. That's pretty good. And they play one of the clips where Dane allegedly stole a joke from Lewis. And basically the idea of the joke is they talk about how they can't wait to name their kid because they want to give him some ridiculous name or just like a sound. And their jokes were pretty similar, but just from that, it's hard to tell because it does seem like a pretty generic joke that people make about how they want to name their kids something stupid. You know, I'm sure everyone's made that joke at one point. But also, this wasn't the only example. There were 2 other clips on YouTube, but they're taken down, which is a little suspicious. And it sounds like there are a lot of other comedians that felt like he was stealing their jokes, which some of them I'm sure were just being bitter and jealous, but other ones, like Joe for example, it doesn't sound like Joe's really jealous of him. And even though he doesn't find Dane funny, it still sounds like he really respects him. And he even admits that Dane stealing jokes, that's not the reason why he became famous. He didn't need to do that.
The real thing about Dane is Dane would have made it without stealing. Dane made it because he's brutally ambitious and he's a very smart guy.
He's a talented too.
Very talented performer.
I
believe all that.
So I think this is the first big controversy that really affected him and his career. But there's something else going on behind the scenes as well around this time, or a little earlier, around 2004, 2005. And it was a similar situation because something happened and the public didn't really hear about it. It wasn't really a big story at the time, but people in the comedy scene were talking about it and the story was getting around. And I'm sure this gave a lot of comedians just another reason to hate him. So around this time, Dane Cook accused another comedian, Steve Byrne, of stealing his essence. So Dane decided to talk to him about it, and then other comedians found out, and this turned into some gossip in the comedy scene. And then in 2010, when Dane Cook was on Mark Maron's podcast, Mark brought this up to him and asked him about it.
I probably said, Steve, it's like you're not being you. It's like you're being me. It's like you're trying to act like me, dress like me. And he even admitted to me at that time in his life, you know what? I'm not where I want to be. Even my own family's looking at me saying, this isn't you. I mean,
too much like Dane.
By the end of no, not that. No, but just that he wasn't being Steve.
Right.
By the end of the conversation, I remember I shook his hand. I said, you know what, Steve? I like you. I think that you're really talented. And I know that everybody goes through these times where we get a little bit lost and try to figure out what the fuck we are on stage.
I like stealing your essence. I do. I like that. And I'm glad that it's poetic. I understand it. I call it a drive shaft. You see, you're thinking I'm attacking you and not.
I've never used that terminology except for that conversation, but yes, I can hear.
And it was so good it had to get out. That's I didn't hear it from Steve Byrne,
right?
But the idea of you saying someone's stealing your essence, it was so good it had to be talked about. Well, you do kind of conjure up pictures of you and your wherever you are up in the hills, and you summon Steve. It's like, you have stolen my essence. Give it back.
All right, if that's what you want, if that really is what you want to believe, if that's what it conjures up, then
here's what I picture. I pictured you looking out of your house.
Come over to my house tonight.
All right.
Come see where I live.
Don't you have a view?
Come see that's not a lair in some,
But you have a view, right?
I do.
Okay, so I was picturing you looking out over Los Angeles.
At that time, I did not live there.
But you were like, with your robe on, going, someone has taken my essence. I can feel it in the force. That's how I pictured it.
All right.
Come on.
If that's what makes you happy.
Come on.
I'm a jeans and t-shirt guy.
So as you could tell, Mark just thought the whole thing was pretty ridiculous. And this whole podcast, he was kind of like, what is your deal, dude? Like, why do people hate you so much? Did you actually do anything wrong? Like, are you actually giving people a reason to hate you? Like, accusing a smaller comedian of stealing your essence, not even your jokes, your essence, does sound kind of goofy, especially after people are accusing you of stealing jokes and you felt like you're wrongfully accused. So you'd probably want to take it easy going after other people, or make sure that you have a lot of evidence to prove that this guy is stealing your essence, which I think is going to be really hard to prove. I mean, proving that somebody stole jokes is already insanely hard, but then just like your style, I don't think you're really going to be able to prove that. So soon after this, Steve actually went on Mark's podcast and they talked about the situation. And of course, Steve has a completely different story of what happened.
He told me that you're stealing my essence. You're trying to be me. You're trying to, have my essence on stage. And I'm just like, look, before I moved here, I didn't know who you were. I heard of you. I didn't work 7 years in New York City for 7 nights a week, 5 shows, sometimes 10 shows a night, to try to be a knockoff version of anybody else. I'm trying to do me, Yeah. And then in the podcast, he goes, Steve even said that he had a conversation with his father about about his comedy. It was like, yeah, I was having a conversation with my dad. I'm still not trying to emulate you. It's not, you're not meriting anything by saying that. It's like literally I was trying to still discover myself. That's the conversation we had.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to be like you. I'm not trying to be like anybody. I'm trying to be me, but I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's the gist of what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
So, in the thing, he's saying that, Steve's dressing like me. He's trying to dress. It's like, dude, jeans and a T-shirt. I never got highlights in my hair or anything. Like, I never wore bracelets or, it just like, to me, it was mind blowing. But we did have a conversation. Okay. At the end of it, it was a decent conversation.
Did he cite bits? Did he cite,
no,
like
and he said that. He said, I can't name a specific bit, but you're trying to be like me. You're trying to steal my essence. And I was just like,
the essencing came up over and over again.
It came up a few times, yeah. But it just he was looking for a word. That's the word he landed on, and he just stuck with it. I thought it was a decent conversation. Okay?
Yeah.
And when I was leaving, he goes, maybe it's not your time to be here right now. Maybe it's not your time to be in Los Angeles right now.
Really?
And I was just like, oh, jeez. I thought we were kind of going to end it all right. And that was the last thing he said to me before I left. And I'm not making this up. Like, I swear to God this happened. This is, again, with everything that I'm saying. He goes, I feel like I'm in this city right now. I drive up into the hills. I overlook the city. And I give the city my energy, and I get the energy back from the city. And he shut his eyes, and he started breathing in and out and kind of doing this thing with his fingers. And I was just like, this dude's just lost the plot. And I just said, I'm done. I don't know what else to say. And I go, okay, well, okay, goodbye.
So that story seems more like what people imagine Dane Cook is like behind the scenes. You know, him being a douchebag and a narcissist. Like when he does podcasts and interviews, he's actually pretty good at coming off as a nice guy and down to earth. But behind the scenes, is he actually like what Steve described here? Is he a raging narcissist that will just try to destroy anybody that gets in his way? It's pretty hard to tell because also there are a lot of respected comedians that Dane started with, like Bill Burr and Patrice O'Neal, who would defend Dane a lot, and they obviously felt like he was a good guy. Like in that clip I played earlier when Joe was talking to the owner of the Laugh Factory, Bill was kind of staying out of it, but he would jump in a little bit to try to defend Dane. And then also on other podcasts, he's talked about how talented Dane is.
And like he doesn't get credit. He kind of came up with like a new genre sort of style, like of it. And you know, it's just a weird business, man.
It is. Some people, it's like the Bo Burnham thing. Some people figure out, not only did he figure out a new way of doing comedy, he did the MySpace shit too. I mean, he was so ahead of it.
That guy is a total fucking trailblazer. What I love is all the shit he got in the beginning. He just shut everybody down and he totally delivers. And then in the end, you find out this guy's a monster fucking talent.
Oh yeah,
that can kind of do everything.
Yeah.
And then also after Mark Maron had Dane on his podcast, Mark went on the Opie and Anthony show, and Patrice O'Neal was on there as well. And Patrice started defending Dane because he thought Mark treated him like shit when he was on his podcast.
Yeah. And I talked to him, and I know that motherfucker, what he's doing is honest. He does not want to do pain comedy that digs deep. He don't.
Right, he's not deep, and he's not interesting. I agree.
Oh,
and
see,
wow,
Mark Maron. Come on, Mark, man.
Damn, Mark. Honestly,
don't do that, man.
Dude, honestly, it's like Dane is just the go-to name, but he's a funnier. Honestly, he's a funny. I have nothing to gain from Dane. He's a funnier guy than people give than comedians give him credit for.
I have absolutely nothing against, so I didn't go into it with any. I didn't vilify him. I don't care about the stealing thing. I don't care about what people think he's a hack or whatever.
You really are a slick white guy.
Listen to me, Patrice.
This is very good, man.
All I'm saying is that I felt like he was just giving me patter. I want to have a conversation.
But you know what? Only people who are finished in the business give you the interview that you're looking for.
That you're hoping for.
Yeah, Dane can't give you.
Is that true?
We see that a lot. Patrice is making a pretty good point.
Can't say anything.
And then also there's another time on the Opie and Anthony show while Patrice was there, Dane called in, and this was probably around the height of his success.
The thing I tell Dane, because a lot of old school guys hate Dane. Old school motherfuckers hate Dane.
There's haters out
and I'll go, look, let me tell you something, man. This motherfucker, and I say this, and this is not no bullshit, man. I don't, you know me, man.
No.
He's righteous.
Patrice O'Neal, you coined it, man. You said the thing though at the back of Nick's one day when everybody was trying to be something they weren't on stage. And I remember you looked at me, dude, and you go, "I'll tell you, man, the thing that's going to make you make it." And he goes, "You can't fuck with the truth." And that's all I ever did, man. I was like, all right, it. I'll just be myself. I'm not going to try to bust balls if I don't want to bust ball. And really, Patrice is one of the guys that actually was, he got me. He got me right away.
And even with Joe Rogan and Dane, obviously Joe had a big problem with him at one point. But then in 2010, he had him on his podcast. And it seemed like they're kind of friendly with each other, but then Dane hasn't been on there since, so I guess maybe they're not the closest. But it sounded like Joe respected him, and he's like, dude, I know we've had our differences, but I think you're a good guy, and I can respect everything you've done.
Right. I know you're a good dude, and I know that you're always working on your act. I see it all the time. I know you're doing the right things, and I hear your interviews, and I know you're in a good place with your mind. And I think that's important, man. And I think it's also important that, at a certain stage in your life, you have to recognize when you've had differences with somebody. And, it's not that I don't like you as a person. It's just differences. And I'm glad that we put all that shit past and we hung out, man.
Oh, man, that means the world hearing that from you, Joe.
Fun,
you got a lot of integrity, and I've always had a lot of respect for you, which is part of the reason that there was, for me, on my side, when anybody ever came to me with anything, it was like, I have really nothing to say about it, and I hope that time will just eventually figure that out. So I appreciate that. Good to be here on your show. We'll do it again.
Yeah, dude, for sure.
So around this time in 2010, this is when Dane's career started tapering off a little bit. So I think Joe kind of recognized that. And then also a few years prior to that, Dane dealt with a lot of personal stuff in his life. Both his parents died within a year of each other. And then also his brother stole $15 million from him.
It was the worst betrayal I'll ever experience in my life, and it was gut-wrenching, and I'd never been sadder in my entire life.
Are you close with him now, or
never spoke to him after that?
No
Spoke
way.
to him for my whole life leading up to the day he went on the run, and then the day he was gone. My brother was gone.
So it's crazy to think about all the ups and downs this guy went through. Like at one point, you probably thought he was invincible, like the most famous person alive. Everything's going well for you. And then just one bad thing after another, like just with all the personal stuff going on in his life. And then also in his career, he tried to make the jump to movies, and he's in a couple big movies, but they weren't selling that well. So the movie career didn't really work for him, and then everyone's hating on him. And then the joke theft accusations, which he said were like one of the hardest things to deal with in his career, because he probably just didn't know what to do to put an end to everyone talking about it. And eventually it came to an end because Louis, on his show, he decided to have Dane on, and he decided that they were going to discuss it on the show. And I think this is kind of like the first time they really talked about it, but Louis wrote him a script, and Dane said he was okay with it. And they basically chalked it up to Dane might have heard Louis' joke at some point, and then he forgot about it. And then it came back into his mind, but he didn't realize it was Louis. He thought it was an original thought. So on the show, Louis just like, I know you didn't mean to steal the jokes. Maybe you stole them, but I don't think you purposely did it. And it was a way for them to mutually put an end to it without somebody looking really bad. I think Louis, he was trying to be polite about it the whole time. Like Joe was saying, he didn't want to speak up about it because he didn't want to seem jealous. So he thought that this would be the best way to do it.
A lot of people just said he's a horrible thief, and he was so vilified that it was really hard to watch happen. But anyway, I don't know. I started to think about him as I was writing season 2, and I thought it would be interesting to have us talk about it. So I sat down and I thought about the things I've read him say in the press and heard him say, and I thought I channeled him. Like I thought if I can make him the sort of the winner of the debate, or at least an even match, then it's worth doing.
So also around this time, after the whole roller coaster ride that Dane just went through with his career and his personal life and everything, he decided to take a break from comedy and just relax for a bit. I think he took like a year off. And then in early 2012, he decided to make his return. But one of his first few sets back ended with a lot of controversy. So of course this happened at the Laugh Factory, but there's no video of it. So we just have people that talked about it afterwards. And apparently he went there, he bumped a bunch of comedians, and then he did a set for like 50 minutes to an hour. And those comedians that he bumped weren't too happy about that. And apparently while he was on stage, his act wasn't going very well, and it just kept getting worse. And this is how somebody described it in this article. They said, "We were bombarded with the egotistical ramblings of a narcissist who has lost all touch with humility and quite possibly humanity." And then one of the comedians that he bumped, he said, "Watched him spiral for 45 minutes before I left. It could have been worse. He could have done his act." And then also, I guess, Jenna Marbles was there, the YouTuber, and she said, "Dane Cook took a shit on everyone, might as well have been literally." But the person who was there that had the most to say about it was TJ Miller, because I think he was bumped as well. And he just went off on Dane on Twitter, I believe. And he had a lot to say about Dane and his whole career and everything. Like, he went deep into this. I'm just going to read some of it, like what he saw at the Laugh Factory. He said, "Effing Dane Cook is eating shit at the Laugh Factory. He bumped Bobby Lee and is just being mean." And then he went on to say, "Watching him try to work through his own shit on stage when he's saying, 'Go F a dirty whore,' that's the best therapy, Dane. You've been doing stand-up for many years and you still believe it's okay to bomb and talk about your issues? You didn't earn this." Then he also said, "Last night he got on stage and was vicious, misogynistic, cruel, and arrogant. He talked about not paying for an abortion. He talked about finding some new whore to F to take his anger out at his ex-girlfriend. He talked about how girls would do anything for him because I'm me. He got mad when people were texting. He said, 'Dane is on stage. Have some effing respect.'" And then DJ went on to say, "Here's an idea. Dane, have some effing respect for your audience that gave you a chance to be what you dreamed of being, and don't be mad at them because you effed it all up from hubris and thirst of fame. Don't disrespect the people that gave you a chance. Don't do an hour of mean-spirited trash. And Dane Cook, certainly don't ask anyone to feel sorry for you. If you are the person you were on stage last night, then you are not a good person. And the way you talked about women is disgusting and pathetic, but really just hurtful. So good luck, Chuck. Need all the luck in the world to realize you need to go to therapy and figure out how to not be a hateful person. Stop performing until you do so." So TJ went really hard on him, and maybe he's exaggerating some parts, but it sounds like there's something there. Like people are saying he had a meltdown on stage pretty much, which I believe. I mean, it doesn't sound that crazy. He dealt with a lot, and then his career started to fade away, and he's got this huge ego. So he probably wants to go on stage and just let it all out, and that's what happened. And I think when it comes to his comedy career, he does turn into an egomaniac. Like when he's on a podcast, like I was saying, he seems pretty normal and it seems like a good dude. But then when it comes to his career, he is not messing around. So after this, he was on the Ice House Chronicles, which is a podcast with like a bunch of comedians like Joe Rogan and Bert Kreischer and Ari Shaffir. And he was on there soon after this happened, and he was talking about it. And of course, he was really pissed off about it. But he's on a podcast, so he was kind of keeping it reserved, but you could tell he was pissed.
What he fucking said about me, I don't give a a lot of people said a lot of shit about me for a long time.
Yeah.
I can roll with that. This is bad for comedy. This is bad for comics.
It's bad for people taking chances.
He broke the fucking comic cop code is what he did. He really did, man. He let TMZ into the club while we're trying to work out.
I was telling him, I was like, it's a Wednesday at a workout club.
Yeah.
That's you're supposed to do.
People don't understand this.
He's a mutant and he's a dummy.
I've said shit on stage before where I don't even know why the I was saying it. I was just floundering, and I was trying to work out some new stuff, and I maybe forgot a part of it. So I just went down a road, and I was stuck somewhere, and I had to come to some sort of a logical conclusion. So you say something, and then
or you're like, that's not going.
And then
anywhere.
I'll have to admit, I don't believe that at all. I'm just after a year off.
Right.
It must be horrific.
Who cares if I'm bombing somewhere? I wouldn't want somebody that I don't really know that well saying Ari's bombing right now.
Not just
and
going, but
no story would get out of it.
Breaking
But I wouldn't even
down
want
your
that.
personality and why you're bombing and doing this psychological exam
and not tagging you in any of it, like a.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's like I find it hard to believe that he's just standing up for women. You know, it's always this. It's always they always go with it's misogynistic, and sometimes people try to say shit they don't really believe because it's kind of funny and it's shocking.
I believed it.
Well, I don't know what you said. I don't know what it was.
I wanted to murder my ex-girlfriend, and I planned it. I wanted her to. Yeah, but not really.
Yeah,
but really, the way we all.
I've been there.
And that's another thing. Dane was having girlfriend problems, which, as you probably know, can drive guys insane. Just look at Ari Shaffir, like he said. He's been there. He beat Bobby Lee up for 3 weeks over a girl. And Joe Rogan, he's had problems like that too. He used to always yell at strippers. He would yell at girls on news radio, and they'd run away crying. And then Dane, it sounded like he had some problem with his girlfriend. Then he went on stage and just had a meltdown over it. And then even TJ Miller, the one that was accusing Dane of being a misogynist, he ended up having some accusations thrown at him later on in his career.
I took a year. I did the work. Hard work. And so I'm like 3 sets in. I'm like, I'm ready to go up and just, stretch. I'm batting practice right now. There's no stats being put up. I'm fucking in front of 40 people. I'm not getting paid.
Right.
It's fucking nothing.
That's what you're supposed to do.
I
That's
go
how
to
you
Bobby
create
Lee and go,
material.
Bobby, is it cool? I'm going to go next. Bobby, yeah.
Is that what he said? That many yas?
Yeah. I had a fucking silly hat on, some weird mustache, Bobby. And so to get up there to do that, come home, and when I saw that, what I immediately realized was it wasn't about the set because I was into the set. I would tell you if I took a hot one.
So you had
I was in the
good
zone.
moments and bad moments, and it was a set.
You know when you're engaging with the crowd. You know. When you hear this,
right?
When people start saying like, "Come on,"
nothing
for an hour. At 40, I was going to leave. People were still enjoying it. What I realized when I got off was this guy had a gripe that he had to go on after later. And it was more about, I just got bumped. It's like, motherfucker, you're in L.A. This is where people showcase. It's a showcase club. It's my home club. You're going to get bumped out here. New York, L.A., you're going to get bumped.
Is he a New York guy?
I don't know who Joe, I
Is
didn't
he
know
an
his
LA guy?
name
Probably
before
LA.
yesterday. I didn't know him. I never worked with him. I didn't know.
I'm sure him getting bumped was part of it, but also I wish Dane could just be honest. Like, it definitely sounds like he did not have a good set and he had a bit of a meltdown, but he's making it seem like, oh yeah, it was fine. I was doing well. The audience was into it. I don't know. From other people talking about it, it doesn't sound like they were. And I think Joe and all the other comedians are probably even aware that he bombed because just the way they're talking about it, Joe's like, yeah, dude, I understand. Sometimes when I'm doing a joke, I don't know where it's going to go, and sometimes it gets offensive. So I think they know what happened. They're kind of familiar with it, and they're still defending him. I mean, they understand it. They're comedians, and they don't like the tweet that TJ put out. They think that's too far. But also, Joe brings up how he thinks a lot of comedians are just pissed about the fact that he's bumping people. And he's like, dude, why can't you just schedule something? But Dane's making it sound like he's way too busy for that. And Joe's like, really? And, you know, also I think it's just an ego thing. I think the fact that he shows up and he can tell all these comedians that they need to wait for him to go on stage and he can go as long as he wants. I think he needs that ego boost before he goes on stage, and that's almost part of his act. And he probably wants other comedians to look at him like, oh, there he is. That guy's a legend. Like, I'm happy he bumped me. But that's not how it went that night, and mostly the comedians were pissed. So I'm sure that pissed off Dane.
You know, I mean, everybody always did it. The Damon Wayans of the world. We'd look forward to it, man. As comics, we'd sit in the back of the room and watch.
Yeah.
You know,
You look forward to seeing them, but you know you're upset when you're like, now I won't be able to go on.
Sure, but you know what? That's a part of the program, man.
Right, and isn't there something to be said of like, you know what? Maybe I just need to learn something tonight from somebody who actually has gone through this and, and has found success.
See what it's like. So, Dane, the real issue seems that people have a problem with you just going up whenever you want to go up. That seems to be the real issue.
It's anybody, really, but that's not the real issue.
Yeah.
Everyone likes their time.
I only have ever, you know, New York at the Cellar, which I haven't been back there a lot because, you know, I'm here. I live here. It's like the Factory. That's it. That's my home club. That's the one place where I stop in if it's like, shit, I just want to get up. And I don't want to do that thing where I go, put me on the show, and then I can't go. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm into a lot of stuff. I can't show, and then people are like, oh, he doesn't show up.
And they sold like 350 tickets.
I hate that. It's like I'd rather stop in last minute.
So your life is that erratic that you can't like plan a show?
It's not like that all the time, but
a lot of the time.
Are times.
Then a few years after this, I found a clip of TJ Miller on a radio show talking about the situation.
So then it falls on me to go up after Dane. And that's when Dane he kind of went really long, and he started to kind of, in my opinion, berate the audience and kind of be mean to the audience. And he singled some people out, and, you know... And then he did some material that I think people thought was a little misogynistic rather than edgy, and kind of like gross and weird. It was mean. Some of it was mean, and he was doing so much time. So I just, you know, I think I was just, you know, drunkenly went off on Twitter and was like, what is this guy's problem? This is why he doesn't have a movie career, because he doesn't understand why you can't alienate people, and he's doing it for himself, and really, really laid into him. We kind of made up, and since then, I kind of apologized to him. I said, you know what? I shouldn't have gone off on you on Twitter. I just should have come up after the show and just laid into you right there. And he was like, yeah, I wish you would, because then we would have been able to hash it out, and I would have been...
And then in 2015, Dane Cook was actually banned from the Laugh Factory, and there's all just like rumors about it. No one's really sure why. I found this article. They said that he got in a fight with a waitress, and then he got in an argument with the owner and said, I own this place, which sounds about right. But I also did find this podcast with Bobby Kelly, who is good friends with Dane. I think they toured together and they started doing comedy around the same time. And he has a bunch of other comedians on, and this gets brought up, and I don't think he heard about it yet. And then they start talking about the rumors and like what everyone heard.
That Dane Cook shit that I heard about. Did you guys hear about that? How he got banned from the Laugh Factory?
Yeah.
You didn't hear about this?
What?
No, this is crazy shit. He got banned for life or something.
I heard the story last week for the first time, and I was like, ooh.
What?
So Dane,
are we not allowed to talk about this?
I don't know.
So Dane, you know, kind of has free run there. They call it the house that Dane built. There's rumors that he's got like financial stake in it, whatever, which I don't know. Anyway, but he can drop in at any time, and they let him just go for an hour. And there's like a whole big thing a couple years ago about it. Anyway, he drops in on this show. So anyway, they're like, but you got to keep it to 10. We're gonna light you. I know we don't usually do this. He goes, yeah. Gets up on stage. They light him. He runs over it. It's like 10 more minutes. They start flicking the light. He just has a meltdown. He calls the manager from on stage.
Well, like now,
Wait,
was it
he
a
melted
guy?
down when the light, so they kept flicking, and he's like,
yeah.
My understanding was that they told him not to come by that night, specifically for this show. And again, I don't know if this
That might
is
be
right.
part of it.
That's the story I heard too.
But I heard they told him not to come by, and then he actually came by and forced himself on stage, and then went over.
Forced himself? How do you do that?
Well, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure with his
so wait a minute.
I feel like these are not mutually exclusive parts of the story.
Okay, so real quick. So he, on stage, what happens?
So he
says she was a woman.
I believe so. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Masada just was like, "That's it. You're done. You didn't listen to anything, and you absolutely cannot do that on stage in front of
Jamie.
the crowd." Yeah.
Badi, you're gone, Badi, you're gone.
Exactly.
You're done, Badi. Oh, look, I'm not saying it's not valid that what happened. I'm just saying that
I mean, there's got to be more leading up to it. You know, there's got to be things people don't know.
Listen, man, to get banned from your club is crazy.
I mean, the bumping out there is insane to the point that that's why I think people don't get paid well.
You're saying.
Well, it's funny that even in this room right now, we went boom, bang. I mean, there's so many different stories in this room, and
no idea what happened.
No, I mean, it's not public. It's not on a blog. It's not anywhere.
Yeah, it's funny that no one ever recorded any of these meltdowns that Dane had. Like these examples that I brought up, it's all just like he said, she said. There's no video of it. So I guess he kind of got lucky with that. Or maybe he was telling people that they couldn't use their phones while he's performing or something. But it definitely sounds like there's some truth to these stories. I mean, it's not just one incident. And, you know, I'm sure some of them are exaggerated and there's probably more to it. But it definitely sounds like Dane has his moments and his ego gets to him and he has meltdowns when things don't go his way. So I also think it's kind of weird that Dane never really started his own podcast because, I mean, he was one of the first comedians to blow up on the internet. And then he was around at the perfect time for podcasting, but I don't think he ever really got one going. I did see he does Twitch streaming now. He had a couple hundred people watching him play Call of Duty, so maybe that's something he's into. But I don't know, maybe he just doesn't care as much anymore. Maybe he's just like, you know what, I'm fine just going on other people's podcasts and doing comedy shows and just some other things here and there. It seems like he's just doing stuff that he wants to do now. He's not really doing anything that's going to put him in the spotlight necessarily, because he probably realized whenever he tries to do that, his ego gets in the way and it just ends in a meltdown. But it's really hard to tell what he thinks about this stuff, because I heard him say a few times that he's accepted that his career isn't what it used to be and he's okay with that. But it sounds like in the early 2010s at least, he did not accept it and he was having a real hard time with that. And just with some of these stories, somebody's got to be lying. Like him and Steve, they have two completely different versions of how that talk went. And then the whole TJ Miller thing at the Laugh Factory, Dane makes it sound like his stand-up was going fine. He wasn't bombing at all. It was just a normal set. But some of the people that were there who talked about it have a completely different story. So, you know, like most things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but I don't know. So let me know what you guys think about it. And that's about it for this video. And just a reminder, my Patreon's up. I'm going to be posting more content on there. If you want bonus content, go check that out. And then make sure you hit the like button here, leave me a comment, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you at the next video.